supernatural activity going on, because it'll throw some light or clarity on the many, many stories I've heard from people who lived on the island and served on the island.
So, Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about the island, some of the history?
All the different layers of Irish history are here, some of them wonderful. But in the monastic period, we had a monastery here. During the Viking period, they attacked us. During our War of Independence, there was people held here. And there was a huge fortress built at the height of the French Revolution. This fortress was converted for use as a prison.
So what kind of people would be held here?
The usual variety of rapists, murderers, and so on.
That sounds pretty violent.
So here we are at the back of A block. One of the legends that we hear, there was a recruit class training here. Two of them woke up one night and very distinctly seen a figure dressed in old military clothing standing by the fireplace in here. A little bit later in the night, one of them said he saw this old dressed soldier reaching his hand out towards somebody that was sleeping in the bunk.
Now, why is this building and the one beside it in such a bad state of repair?
In 1985, the Irish government took a decision to use the fortress as a prison, and it probably was never suitable to accommodate prisoners. And not long after they arrived here, they rioted and destroyed the building, and they did it to both of these blocks.
Okay, where to next, Michael?
Follow me. So here we are in the middle of the old cell block, and more specifically in John Mitchel's cell. John Mitchel was probably the most famous detainee here. He was an Irish patriot who was incarcerated here in 1848.
So can you explain what John Mitchel was doing to be put in here?
Yes, himself and his colleagues in a group called the Young Irelanders had been campaigning for independence for Ireland. He wrote in his newspaper that the only way Ireland would ever achieve independence was by way of armed insurrection, and for that he was sentenced to 14 years.
We were coming around the back of Mitchel's cell, and the guy I was with said, "What's that?" It looked like something was moving, but it was off the ground. It was a white mist, and then it was gone.
Now, fellas, this is Mitchel Hall here. At the time the military were here, it was a social function hall. One individual, or a pair of them, who were sent to work here at one stage to refurbish the floor that we're standing on, they constantly heard footsteps or doors opening and closing and that sort of movement around the place.
Now, was there any sort of rhythm or anything to the footsteps? I mean, was it like a march?
Yeah, they were like the solid, repetitive march. Now, I just needed to be careful here, guys. There's just over a 30-foot of a drop just behind us here, so it's quite dangerous, and be conscious of it. Now, this is an area where some people say they heard the Banshee, not too far from here.
The Banshee is its spirit. Banshee makes herself known by keening or crying, and usually after hearing the crying, there will be a death.
People don't realise how big Spike Island is. It's 104 acres. Inside the fort, it's just around 23 to 24 acres. Spike Island was never built, the fort here, for a prison. It was built as a military fort to defend Cork Harbour, the second biggest natural harbour in the world. All this was built by the Royal British Engineers and military. Some of the convicts were used in the labour of the fort. So this is the entry into Fortress Spike Island. So when you go through here, this is the only way into the fort and it's the only way out. And it was a convict prison with the military here as well, the British, in 1847 to 1883. And it did become the biggest prison in the world, with over 2,500 convicts here at any given time. This is the 1916 building. And as you can see over here, we have the A block. And now way over, the one that looks like a church, because it was a church when the British was here, this is the C block. In 1855, the latest thing happened. Unfortunately, one of the prison wardens was brutally murdered in the A block by two convicts, so they decided to build the punishment block, and this is the only purposely built building on Spike Island as a prison. Spike Island was also known as a silent island, so communication was not allowed on the island, so some of these convicts weren't even allowed to talk to each other. Many of these men would be heard laughing one minute, crying the next minute, and shouting out loud. And mental illness was a big issue here because of the isolation of these men that were put in here. The cells are fairly small, but we've evidence that up to 15 convicts at any given time were put into one of these cells as well. So overcrowding was a massive thing here on Spike Island. Inside here, this is like what it would be for the convicts when they were leaving Spike Island to go to Van Diemen's Land. So for an example, if you look closely, you can see that this represents, this man has a badge, C3, who could have been here for just robbing fruit, but you also had very dangerous men here as well. But they're all putting together, so you can just imagine what must have happened on the way over to Van Diemen's Land here as well. You also had the modern prison because Spike Island opened in 1985 as a prison and it closed in 2004. But then again, most importantly as well, is in 1921, during the War of Independence, approximately 900 Republican political prisoners were held here too on Spike Island, so it was used as a prison then as well. And the whole prison closed then in 2004.
The riot on Spike Island started on Saturday night, the 31st of August 1985, and it started here in this block, which is called A block. And it started when some of the prisoners in there set fire to the timber floors. I was based in Cork prison at the time, and of course reinforcements were sent for, and most of us were actually sent down here. And it finished then on the Sunday evening when they ended up on top of C block, and that's where the riot finished around 5 o'clock on the Sunday evening. By coincidence, the Republican internees that were held here in 1921 were also in A block, and they rioted later in 1921, did considerable damage there as well. So in effect, A block was destroyed in 85, but was very, very extensively damaged in 1921 by the Republican internees.
Many came into this island, but many never actually left because we've got evidence of about 1,500 men who did die on the island. You know, we haven't fully found the rest of the convicts yet. Many people would say there must be a lot more than we have on record. So, you know, we must get closure on that too, and we will be doing projects on that in the future as well.